Have you ever witnessed a family dispute over an inheritance?
Oh, those can be brutal.
Right. I mean, you know the exact kind of dynamic I'm talking about. The quiet resentments around the dinner table, the sudden hushed legal threats between siblings over a house or maybe a specific piece of heirloom jewelry.
Yeah, it brings out the absolute worst in people.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine that exact same dispute, but the stakes involve a 30 million pound estate, literal royal jewels, and a constitutional crisis that strikes at the very foundation of the British monarchy.
It really is like the ultimate family drama, but played out with corporate lawyers and constitutional leverage.
Yeah, it's wild.
Because when you strip away the royal titles and the pageantry, what you are looking at is a profound collision. It's King Charles's desire to modernize the institution crashing right into the unbreakable power of binding legal contracts.
That is so true. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the explosive behind-the-scenes events of March 25, 2026.
A very significant date.
Very, because this was the day a team of property lawyers marched straight into the Crown Estate offices and Buckingham Palace and just, boom, dropped a dossier on the table that completely shattered the king's plans for his youngest brother, Prince Edward.
And this dossier contained everything Edward had been building in absolute silence for decades.
Decades.
Literally.
Every
receipt, every corporate lease, every private letter. I mean, it was a masterclass in long-term defensive strategy.
It is an incredible story of legal maneuvering, and honestly, you are going to want to stick around for this entire deep dive.
You really are.
Because by the end of this timeline, an unexpected royal, Princess Anne, steps in with a constitutional argument that permanently shifts the balance of power in the modern monarchy.
She completely turns the tables.
She does. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the literal ground they were fighting over, which is Bagshot Park.
Right. The realist.
Yeah. So, King Charles believed his role as a modernizing monarch gave him the authority to aggressively audit and reclaim royal properties. And Bagshot Park was right at the top of his target list.
And to understand why it was targeted, we have to look at the mechanics of the Crown Estate and what Bagshot Park actually is.
Which is massive, right?
Huge. It's a 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion sitting on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park.
Wow.
But, and this is key, when Prince Edward officially took the lease in 1998, it was a complete mess. The previous tenant was an army chaplaincy, and they had left it severely dilapidated.
So it wasn't some pristine palace.
Not at all. The Crown Estate didn't even want to maintain it as a royal residence. There were serious drafted plans floating around to offload it and turn it into like a commercial hotel or a conference center.
Right, it was basically a total fixer-upper. So Edward takes the list. The original terms were, what, £5,000 a year for 50 years?
Yes, £5,000.
But that extremely low rent came with a catch. He had to fix the place up immediately, and the Crown Estate wasn't going to foot the bill.
Exactly. They washed their hands of the maintenance.
Right. And according to the sources, Edward poured £1.36 million of his own pre-royal private money into the initial renovations. And the total repair bill eventually hit £2.98 million.
Correct. I mean, he essentially saved a historical building from commercial ruin.
Yeah.
And once it was habitable again, his rent skyrocketed to £90,000 a year.
Which is a huge jump.
Massive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crucial to note that the National Audit Office officially confirmed this was fair market value for the property.
Which brings up a wildly relatable analogy. I mean, imagine you rent a completely rundown, unlivable apartment.
Yeah.
You pay out of your own pocket to gut it, renovate it, replace the plumbing, make it beautiful. And then your landlord, who just happens to be your older brother, tries to evict you so he can sell it or utilize it for a massive profit.
It's a very harsh dynamic.
Because by 2026, this property isn't a rundown shell anymore. It's worth £30 million. But wait, if the Crown Estate technically owns all the land, doesn't Charles have a point? Like, can't he just say the family arrangement is over and the lease is void?
Well, he could certainly try to use internal palace pressure, but that is exactly where Edward's strategy comes in.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is how Edward anticipated this exact vulnerability decades in advance. He knew that relying on a quote-unquote family arrangement was dangerous.
Oh, so he saw it coming.
He absolutely did. So he didn't just renovate the property and hope for the best. In 2007, he used a private company he controlled, called Eclipse Nominees Limited, to pay £5 million to extend that lease to 150 years.
Yay, 150 years, so he completely removed the house from internal royal bureaucracy.
Exactly. By using a nominee company, Edward created a commercial firewall.
How does that work exactly?
So a nominee company holds assets on behalf of a principal. It means the Crown Estate is legally bound to a corporate entity, not just to a younger brother.
Oh,
Yeah. Edward brought the property under standard UK commercial contract law. He bought long-term planning, and he built an unbreakable wall of financial security right under the institution's nose.
that is brilliant.
He even secured the legal right to sell the lease and keep the profit if he chose to.
He essentially corporate-proofed his own home against his own family. And, I mean, you really have to contrast this with how other members of the family operated.
Oh, absolutely.
So look at Prince Andrew, who lived at Royal Lodge for years, rent-free, not paying market rate, which, again, the National Audit Office documented.
Yes, the contrast is stark.
So Charles has one brother who bends the rules, and another who follows standard contract law, pays for his own house with a corporate lease, and yet Edward is the one getting squeezed in the name of modernization.
That is the crux of the tension right there. The palace framed it as an audit to streamline costs. But from Edward's perspective,
Yeah.
he had completely immunized himself legally.
I just don't get it, though. If he's a senior royal with resources, why fight his king over one specific mansion?
That's a fair question.
Like, if the relationship is getting this toxic, just move out and buy a private estate somewhere else. Why dig in so hard over Bagshot Park? That is so dramatic. Did Prince Philip foresee that Charles would eventually try to aggressively consolidate these assets? Is that why he made a point to legally witness it on his deathbed?
Well, consider Prince Philip's vantage point. He spent over 70 years watching the inner workings of the firm.
Yeah, he knew it better than anyone.
He knew exactly how the institution operated behind closed doors. He understood that the Crown Estate functions like a ruthless corporation that quietly moves against people it no longer finds useful.
Wow.
So his deathbed signature was a highly calculated legal shield. He knew that once he and the Queen were gone, Edward would face intense bureaucratic pressure.
And he was right.
He was completely right. Philip signed that document to make it legally impossible for the institution to strip his youngest son of the physical estate that gave his life's role its meaning.
When you really think about it, knowing your family's business is so unsentimental that you have to sign deathbed legal documents just to protect your kids from each other. I mean, that is intense.
It's very sobering.
But the push to reclaim royal assets didn't stop at the property line. Because when King Charles's structural push for Bagshot Park hit Edward's unbreakable corporate wall, the tactics escalated.
They needed a new angle.
Right, the palace had to find a softer target. So the pressure shifted entirely and it became deeply personal, targeting Edward's wife, Sophie.
Yes, when property law failed, the focus pivoted to historical provenance. They initiated what they called a jewelry audit.
And this audit was driven by Queen Camilla's office, right?
That's right.
They framed it to the public as a routine national heritage check.
Yep.
But let's be real about what this was in practice. I want you to imagine your sister-in-law sending an auditor with a clipboard to your house to demand your wedding jewelry back because she claims it actually belongs to the family trust.
It's quite an image. And, they weren't auditing just any piece of jewelry. They specifically targeted the Anthem tiara.
Which is so symbolic for her. Exactly. Queen Elizabeth personally commissioned this tiara for Sophie's wedding in 1999. It's uniquely constructed from 4 antique honeysuckle elements taken directly from Queen Victoria's private collection.
Which is significant because for over 25 years, this was the only tiara Sophie ever wore.
Right.
She wasn't given open access to the grand state vaults like other senior royals.
Right.
The Anthem tiara was her one crown. If the palace successfully reclaims it, she has nothing to wear to state events.
Exactly. And Camilla's office used a very specific legal argument regarding provenance here.
What was their angle?
Well, because the tiara contained historical stones from Queen Victoria's era, they argued it should be classified as crown property.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, in their view, the historical weight of the stones superseded the fact that it was given for a wedding, meaning it officially belongs in the central royal vault, and Sophie would merely be borrowing it.
So she'd have to ask permission.
Precisely. She would have to formally ask permission from the king to wear her own wedding tiara. That is just insulting. But Edward and his lawyers were ready for this pivot too,
They were very prepared.
because they countered the crown property argument by producing a 1999 deed of gift signed by Queen Elizabeth herself.
A very powerful document.
Right, and a deed of gift isn't just a casual family hand-me-down. It is a legal instrument that transfers absolute ownership, completely severing the item from the crown's historical trust. But Edward also had this brilliant secondary defense involving intellectual property law.
Oh, this is where the strategy becomes truly innovative.
Yeah.
Years earlier, Edward had worked with jewelers to design a matching black and white pearl set to accompany the tiara.
Okay.
Because he personally funded the materials and held the design rights, his lawyers argue the tiara and the pearls formed a single artistic unit.
Wait, let me make sure I'm grasping this IP strategy. How does designing a set of pearls give you a legal shield over a 19th century tiara you didn't make?
It sounds wild, I know.
It sounds like, someone giving you the hardware for a computer, but you code a custom operating system that is permanently, intrinsically tied to it. They can't just take the computer back without illegally seizing your copyrighted software, too. Is that what Edward did with the pearls?
That is exactly the mechanism at play, yes.
That is genius.
It's an incredibly clever use of intrinsic design copyright. By claiming the tiara is legally bound to his personal design rights via the pearls, you literally cannot separate the tiara from the pearl set without breaking that copyrighted artistic unit.
Wow.
But beyond the clever IP law, this raises an important question. Because this maneuver by the palace has an enormous logical flaw.
What's that?
Well, if Camilla's argument held up in court that historical stones automatically convert a private gift into state property, wouldn't that backfire entirely?
Oh, it would be a disaster for her.
Right.
If you legally reclassify Elizabeth's private gifts as state property simply because they contain historical royal stones, Camilla's own extensive jewelry collection would fall into the exact same trap. Much of what she wears was gifted to her, but originates from royal sources.
Precisely. It was an incredibly dangerous legal precedent for Camilla's office to try and set.
And Edward's legal team recognized that vulnerability immediately, and they issued a nuclear threat.
They didn't hold back.
They formally told the palace that if the claim on the anthem tiara wasn't dropped by the end of the day on March 25th, they would release Queen Elizabeth's private letters.
Which would have been massive.
Right. Letters that certainly proved Sophie owned the jewelry, but more importantly, letters that revealed Elizabeth's long, cold distance toward Camilla.
Which be an absolute public relations catastrophe.
Total nightmare.
King Charles had spent decades painstakingly rebuilding Camilla's public image, transitioning her from a highly controversial figure to queen consort.
Yeah, that took a lot of work.
A ton of work. Releasing private correspondence from the late queen expressing disdain or hesitation toward Camilla would have undone years of PR work overnight. It escalated the dispute from a debate over antique stones to a direct threat against the king's legacy.
So, by the afternoon of March 25th, Edward isn't taking any chances. He secures the tiara in a private, high-security safe with his own independent security team.
He locked it down.
He's drawn the line. The dossier of corporate leases, deeds, and letters is on the table, but complex legal threats alone weren't going to break the stalemate.
No, they needed something more.
It required a personal intervention from someone with untouchable authority. And that is when Princess Anne walks into Buckingham Palace.
This is the critical turning point of the entire timeline.
It's like a movie scene.
It really is. Princess Anne and Sophie hadn't always been exceptionally close, but after Prince Philip died in 2021 and then the Queen in 2022, they formed a very tight alliance, supporting each other through the institutional shifts.
So Anne marches into the room to confront Charles, no small talk, and she delivers a devastating constitutional argument.
Oh, it's brilliant.
She looks at the king and says, "If our mother's signature on a lease or a deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow."
I mean, it is an absolute masterclass in constitutional logic. You have to remember that the British Constitution is unwritten.
Right.
It relies entirely on precedent and the unbroken chain of authority. Anne didn't walk in there and argue about family feelings or fairness.
She went straight for the foundation.
She attacked the very foundation of the king's power. She reminded Charles that a monarch's authority rests entirely on the continuity of trust.
Because if Charles invalidates the legally binding documents signed by his predecessor, his own mother, He destroys the legal weight of the crown itself.
Exactly. Why would the UK government or foreign states or any commercial entity trust a contract signed by Charles if he actively proves that a sovereign's signature can simply be erased by the next person on the throne?
Oh, man.
Anne trapped him. She made him realize that attacking Edward's contracts meant attacking his own authority to rule.
So what does this all mean? I look at this and I see an incredible parallel. Anne was there decades ago. She watched Princess Diana get systematically isolated, stripped of her HRH title, and broken down by the machinery of the palace. Is Anne stepping in purely out of respect for constitutional law? Or is she aggressively refusing to watch history repeat itself with Sophie?
It's undeniably both. She saw the familiar pattern of the institution as tempting to crush an individual who lacked direct access to power.
Right.
And she had the leverage to stop it, because she didn't just offer constitutional philosophy, she backed it up with a very real, very public threat of her own.
Yes. She told Charles that if the legal harassment of Edward and Sophie didn't stop immediately, she would personally oversee a full public financial audit of Queen Camilla's household.
Which is terrifying for them.
Every single expense, every staff allocation. And because Anne is publicly known for her strict discipline and frugality, the British public would absolutely believe her and support her doing it.
Without a doubt. And she didn't stop there.
What else did she do?
She also threw a protective shield over Edward's children, James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise.
Oh, right.
Because there had been quiet palace pressure to strip them of their protected royal status early, basically pushing them into private life and removing their security.
Just squeezing them from all sides.
Exactly. But Anne blocked it entirely, insisting that decision belonged to their parents, not to Camilla's office.
So Charles is sitting there completely cornered.
Completely.
He can back his wife's demands and risk Anne exposing the household finances while simultaneously destroying the credibility of the crown's signature. Or he can surrender.
And King Charles's own legal team had to tell him the hard truth. After reviewing Edward's dossier, the 150-year Eclipse nominee's lease, the £5 million commercial payment, the 1999 deed of gift, the IP copyright on the artistic unit, and Philip's deathbed witness signature, the lawyers confirmed Edward's position was legally unbreakable.
They couldn't touch him.
They really couldn't. The king simply did not have the authority to override regular UK civil law.
Which brings us to the evening of March 25th and the written defeat. How does a king formally surrender? Quietly.
Very quiet.
The master of the jewel house sends Sophie a short, formal, emotionless note confirming her exclusive private control of the Anthem tiara.
And simultaneously, the aggressive audit into Bagshot Park is suddenly shut down.
Just like that.
Yeah, with the palace issuing this face-saving public statement about recognizing the household's role in maintaining the estate.
It's over. But Charles tries to fix the personal side. He writes a private handwritten note asking Edward for a family meeting to clear the air. And Edward's response: he flat out refuses to meet without his lawyers present.
And that refusal is deeply significant. It signals that the era of brotherly trust is entirely over.
It's gone.
Edward is no longer operating as a younger sibling trying to keep the peace. He is operating as a man who knows the institution is coming for him, and he will never again engage without legal protection.
It's a tragic irony when you step back and look at it. Edward won the battle comprehensively. He secured his title, his home, and his wife's tiara. But the brotherly relationship is dead.
Completely fractured.
The public will see them smiling on balconies at state events, but behind closed doors, it is strictly formal and heavily controlled.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is entirely unprecedented for a senior working royal to successfully use corporate leases, intellectual property rights, and commercial law to force the reigning monarch into a written surrender.
It really is wild.
It permanently fractured the monarchy into two distinct power centers.
Yeah, you have Charles and Camilla on one side, pushing this centralized, streamlined, corporate-style monarchy.
Right.
And on the other side, you have Anne, Edward, and Sophie holding the line, protecting what they have, and reportedly quietly backed by William and Catherine. It's a Cold War inside the palace.
It fundamentally changes how we understand royal power today. The ultimate lesson here is that absolute power doesn't exist anymore, even for a king facing his own family. Meticulous record-keeping, long-term commercial financial planning, and a deep understanding of contract law are the ultimate shields against institutional overreach.
Paperwork saves the day.
It really does. Edward didn't win because he was a prince. He won because he had an airtight paper trail and understood the law better than the Crown Estate did.
It just goes to show whether you are fighting over a suburban duplex or a 30 million pound, 120-room Gothic mansion in Windsor Great Park, get it in writing
Absolutely.
and keep your receipts. This deep dive really peels back the curtain on those complex legal mechanisms operating behind palace doors. It's not just pageantry and tiaras, it's high-stakes corporate warfare.
It really is.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, and I want to hear from you. Who do you think was actually in the right here? Was Charles justified in trying to reclaim state assets to modernize and streamline the monarchy, or was Edward right to utilize corporate law to armor his home and his wife's jewelry? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments.
It's definitely a debate worth having.
For sure. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought.
Yeah.
Think about Edward's son, James, Earl of Wessex.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. One day, he will inherit that Duke of Edinburgh title. He will inherit the lease to Bagshot Park. But how will his loyalty to the crown be shaped as he grows up, knowing that he had to watch his father use commercial lawyers to fight off the very institution they serve?
That's a heavy burden to carry.
Knowing that the crown tried to strip his family of everything they had built, it brings us right back to where we started. When an inheritance dispute tears a family apart, the cracks don't just disappear when the lawyers go home and the documents are signed. Those fractures get passed down to the next generation.
Very true.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more insights into the hidden mechanics of power, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. We'll see you next time.